Hi, good evening. I'd like to welcome you to Poem Praise 2, and we are going to go ahead and let's get into the explosion of redemption. And I certainly hope that peace and blessings have been upon you this day. Now, before we go into the evening, let's read a little bit of this today, okay? Almost like a nighttime story, but not really. Let's read a little bit of chapter 2. We're in 2? No, we're not in 2 on Poem Praise 2. We're just in chapter 1, the first quarter. This is take 2. And it goes like this of the first chapter. My mother, which held the position of backbone in our family, was Bertha Marie Simmons, born and raised in Marshall, Texas. I do not know how much about my mother's upbringing or childhood either. My mother went to Bishop College, where she was a cheerleader. After graduating, she would go on to receive her master's degree from Prairie View A&M. Also, she was a school teacher for 30 years. My mother taught school in Cattle Mills, Texas, which was a small town 10 miles west of our hometown, Greenville. I was told that my mother and father met in a very unusual and hilarious way. The story took place at one of my father's games where they were playing my mother's college. My dad was tackled on one play out of bounds right in front of Bishop College cheerleaders. My mother saw my dad lying on the ground, and instead of helping him up, she pushed her small little foot into his chest and told him, "You are going to lose tonight." Call it love at first step. But after that game, they would forever be together until the end. They would go on to stay married for 50 years. Although the beginning of the first quarter of my life started out rough, I can say that having these two people as my parents would give me the fuel to procure forgiveness for my biological parents. The love my two adoptive parents gave me would be instrumental in my life in more ways than one. Midway through the first quarter of my life, we can see that the misfortune that bestowed itself upon my existence was something that could ruin my life before it started. Thank God that was not the case. Many kids given up for adoption find themselves going from foster home to foster home and moving from school to school. Thanks to my adoptive parents, my upbringing was blessed with much love and care. As young Rapscallion, Rapscallion, I attended Cattle Mills Elementary School from 1st through the 8th grade. My mom was the only black teacher, and I was in the first class of integrated students at Cato. This was another time where I was forced to deal with a negative position I was placed in through no fault of my own. Being black in the South was interesting. At the time, Cattle Mills' population was about 710 people. Besides my mom making advancement for black teachers and me being a part of the first integrated class, my dad was facing racial tension as well. This was still the 1960s in Texas, and that damn racist ass sign had just been taken down. This is not a brush big enough to paint on a canvas the issues going on in the world or in Texas during that time. Everything was so divided. The part of the slogan that said the whitest people was very true. They kept to themselves and we kept to ourselves. My dad's pool hall and cafe was the place where only black people congregated. The only white people who came to our community were cops. And I'm positive they only came to keep us away from the, quote, whitest people, end quote. Regardless of what was going on in the world, my parents made sure education was a priority in my life. Kindergarten through 8th grade was what I considered a breeze, because my mother was on top of her game when it came to me and my schoolwork. She was very strict. I could not go outside and play until my homework was done and double checked by her. Having parents who were both educators had its advantages. I was a straight A student throughout my years in elementary school. However, I have to be honest and say I felt superior to most students my age due to both my parents being teachers and considering what we are as children believed was smart. Truly, I felt I was smarter than kids my age. Soon that confidence would cause me to think somehow I was smarter than my parents. Although they were loving parents and strict with their love, this confidence somehow made me feel like I was able to run my life on my own. I believe that my adoption was not discussed because my parents loved me unconditionally. But in the back of their minds, they had to be somewhat more lenient when it came to me because of the unmerited pain I had to go through being discarded by my birth parents. During my challenging times, they raised me in such a positive environment, dealing with all of the issues I had as an adopted child. Once a dose of testosterone had entered their lives, all subsequent male children go through a stage of rebellion against authority figures. As I grew into a young man, I am sure my dad knew that at some point I would need physical discipline to help me deal with the flood of testosterone to my body. Given that my dad was such a great athlete, he used what he knew best. He approached me when I was in the 5th grade and made a deal with me. He said, "Son, if you play football for me, I will make sure you have every little thing you desire." Of course, the desire of a 5th grader are more along the lines of toys, bicycles, candy, which were not bank breakers. Besides using my dad's offer to negotiate a new bicycle, I discovered one extra benefit about football, and that is by 8th grade, when the proverbial Proverbial veil was removed from my childlike eyes about girls. I learned they dig guys who play football. Yahtzee. The newfound energy and independence really exciting my already self-aggrandized ideology that I was smarter than my parents and therefore able to run my life. I had unlimited access to all the things that kids wanted in addition to more responsibility than older teenagers. This had its pluses and minuses. However, it would be the beginning of what would eventually ruin my life. Pulling from that theory, I could run my life the way I saw fit. I decided to do adult things one day at lunch during my 8th grade year of school. It all went down when I was walking through the schoolyard and I saw the star running back for Cattle Mills High School just hanging out by himself. Since I idolized him, I went over to see what he was doing. I saw him smoking what looked like a cigarette. It happened to be weed. He asked me if I wanted to try it. Since he was my idol, I couldn't say no. So I said yes. Without a second thought, that opened a door to a dark hallway I walked right through in a very adult way. At the time, I did not understand the ramifications that would come from this small decision. But you will soon see what this one event instigated in my life. In 9th grade, I transferred to GISD at Greensville Center School. Since I was in high school, I was away from my mother's watchful eyes. But not far from all the good things they instilled in me. I still had to bring my homework home to be checked by her, as well as get all of my report cards signed. Even though I was still pursuing this dark adult hallway, even though I was still pursuing this dark adult hallway, not being around my mom at school did not deter me from being a good student. Despite engaging in adult extracurricular activities, I was still able to maintain a B+ grade point average. I already mentioned how my dad was a very intimidating figure. He had a scowl that would make the toughest man rethink his behavior. That alone gave me the motivation to pass every class I took and keep my weed smoking to myself. Though I looked like the model student and athlete, I was still very much so investigating the darker side of my pain. However, I did not know it was pain. I guess all the good my parents did for me did not address the pain related to my lack of unforgiveness around being given up for adoption. My superior intelligence and emotional exposure made for a very adult 9th grader. I have to say, in a football game, every quarter has a play that can change the direction and energy of the game. When I tried weed for the first time, it was the game-changing play in the first quarter of my life that would affect the game for real. Smoking weed made me feel like an adult. So I started running with my own clique of guys away from home. There was Benny Barrett, a.k.a. Frag, Cedric Mack, a.k.a. Mac, Melvin Gilstrap, a.k.a. Strap City Dog, Tommy Wilson, a.k.a. Clint, Mike Buchanan, a.k.a. Big Buck, and Danny Allen, a.k.a. Danny Boy, are rootin' or rotten because he never took baths. Benny lived right behind me, and our backyards were only separated by a fence. Cedric, Melvin, and Tommy, a.k.a. Clint, lived only a couple of blocks away. Big Butt and Rotten lived in West Garden, which was called the Projects. All of my friends are like brothers to this very day. Growing up in Greenville, we did everything together. Played sandlot football, basketball, track, and baseball. So whatever season was going on, that's what we played. We used to ask Danny Allen, a.k.a. Rotten, why he wouldn't take a bath. And he would proudly say, water is for the ducks. Wow. And that does complete this take, which is take 2 here on Poem Praise 2. Stay tuned for take 3. And I believe with take 3, yeah, we're going to finish up chapter 1 and head on to chapter 2, which is going to be second quarter. So until then, I want you and your family to be blessed. Have a wonderful rest of the evening. And I will talk with you soon here on Poem Praise 2. All right? And later, y'all.